This deception runs so deep that most people never question it. They wake up each morning and hand over the keys to their inner kingdom to whatever circumstances they might encounter. A traffic jam ruins their mood. A critical comment destroys their confidence. A financial setback creates weeks of anxiety. They have become prisoners of their own reactions, slaves to the very experiences they were meant to master. But what if I told you that everything you've been taught about emotional control is backward? What if the secret to unshakable calm isn't found in changing your circumstances, but in understanding a principle so profound that once you grasp it, you'll never again be at the mercy of external events? Let me share with you the story of a man who discovered this truth in the most unlikely place. 23 years ago, in a maximum security prison, there lived an inmate who had been sentenced to life without parole. For the first 5 years of his incarceration, he was exactly what you'd expect: bitter, angry, constantly fighting the system and other inmates. He spent most of his time in solitary confinement, a concrete cell measuring 6 feet by 9 feet, with no windows and artificial light that never dimmed. Most men would have broken under such conditions. Instead, something remarkable happened. During his 7th year in that cell, this man made a discovery that would transform not only his own existence, but the lives of every person who encountered him. He realized that while the prison authorities controlled his body, they had no power over his mind. While they could lock him away from the world, they couldn't touch the realm of his consciousness. This revelation didn't come through reading books or attending seminars. It came through sheer necessity. Faced with the choice between madness and mastery, he chose. He began to understand that his emotional state was not determined by his concrete walls, his uncomfortable bed, or his limited food. It was determined by where he chose to direct his attention and how he chose to interpret his experience. Day by day, hour by hour, he began to train his mind. When anger arose, he observed it without becoming it. When despair visited, he acknowledged it without surrendering to it. When fear whispered its dark prophecies, he listened without believing. He discovered that emotions are like weather. They come and go, but the sky of consciousness remains unchanged. The transformation was so profound that other inmates began to notice. This man, who had once been known for his explosive temper, now moved through the prison with an almost supernatural calm. Guards who had dreaded dealing with him found themselves seeking his advice. Fellow inmates, who had feared his rage, now came to him for guidance. He had become an island of peace in an ocean of chaos. But here's what's truly remarkable. When he was finally released after 20 years, he said the most difficult part of his journey wasn't learning to find peace in prison, it was maintaining that peace when he returned to the outside world. In prison, he had learned to control his responses to obvious challenges. In the free world, he had to maintain that same discipline amid the subtle irritations of daily life. This brings us to a crucial question. If a man can find perfect serenity in solitary confinement, what excuse do you have for losing your composure in a traffic jam? If someone can maintain inner peace while surrounded by concrete and steel, why do you allow an email to disturb your tranquility? If he could transform a prison cell into a sanctuary, why can't you transform your current circumstances into a training ground for mastery? The answer lies in understanding what this man discovered, that calmness is not the absence of storms, but the presence of an unshakable center. It's not about living in a world without challenges. It's about becoming someone who remains steady regardless of what challenges arise. Most people approach emotional control backwards. They try to eliminate stress from their lives instead of building strength to handle stress. They attempt to avoid difficulties instead of developing the capacity to navigate difficulties with grace. They seek to control their environment instead of mastering their response to that environment. But here's the profound truth that will change everything. All external events are completely neutral until you assign meaning to them. The traffic jam isn't frustrating. Your interpretation of the traffic jam creates frustration. The criticism isn't hurtful. Your attachment to others' opinions creates hurt. The financial setback isn't devastating. Your fear of scarcity creates devastation. This doesn't mean you should become indifferent to life's challenges. It means you should become the conscious author of your response to those challenges. There's a vast difference between someone who doesn't care and someone who cares deeply but remains centered while caring. Think about this for a moment. How many times today have you handed over control of your emotional state to something completely outside your influence? How many times have you allowed your inner peace to be disturbed by events that in the grand scheme of your life matter very little? How many times have you reacted automatically instead of responding consciously? The prison inmate story teaches us that freedom isn't about your circumstances, it's about your relationship to your circumstances. He was physically imprisoned, but mentally free. Most people are physically free but mentally imprisoned by their own reactions, their own interpretations, their own unconscious patterns of response. This is why traditional advice about staying calm fails so miserably. People are told to just relax or don't let it bother you, without being given the tools to actually accomplish this. They're given the destination without the map. They're told what to do without being shown how to do it. The how begins with a fundamental shift in understanding. You must stop seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances and start seeing yourself as the architect of your experience. You must stop believing that your emotional state is determined by what happens to you and start recognizing that it's determined by what you do with what happens to you. This shift requires more than intellectual understanding. It requires a complete rewiring of your automatic responses. It requires you to become an observer of your own mind, to catch yourself in the act of reacting, and to choose your response consciously rather than automatically. The man in the prison cell didn't achieve this overnight. It took years of patient practice, of catching himself in reactive patterns, and choosing different. But every moment of conscious choice built upon the previous one, creating a foundation of inner strength that no external circumstance could shake. This is your invitation to begin that same journey. Not tomorrow, not when your circumstances improve, but right now in this moment. Your training ground isn't a prison cell, it's your daily life. Your challenges aren't concrete walls, they're the ordinary irritations and extraordinary pressures that life presents to every human being. The question isn't whether you'll face difficulties, the question is whether you'll face them as a victim of your circumstances, or as a master of your responses. Will you be someone who reacts to life, or someone who responds to life? Will you be enslaved by your emotions, or will you be the sovereign ruler of your own inner kingdom? The choice is yours, and it begins with understanding that your emotional state is not determined by what happens to you, but by what you choose to do with what happens to you. This understanding is the foundation upon which all lasting calm is built. Now that you understand the great deception that keeps most people in emotional bondage, let's explore what it means to build true sovereignty over your inner realm. Real power, the kind that creates lasting change and unshakable peace, comes not from controlling external circumstances, but from governing your internal responses to those circumstances. Think of yourself as the ruler of a vast kingdom. This kingdom is your consciousness, your thoughts, emotions, reactions, and interpretations. Like any kingdom, it requires constant governance. Left unattended, it falls into chaos. Properly managed, it becomes a source of strength and stability that nothing external can shake. Most people abdicate this throne. They allow their kingdom to be ruled by whatever force happens to be loudest at the moment. A harsh word becomes a dictator. A financial worry becomes a tyrant. A disappointment becomes a conqueror. They've given up their birthright, the right to rule their own inner world, and wonder why they feel powerless. But sovereignty isn't claimed through force or struggle. It's claimed through understanding and consistent practice. Just as a lighthouse remains steady while storms rage around it, unmoved by the very forces that threaten to destroy lesser structures, you can learn to remain centered while chaos swirls around you. The lighthouse doesn't fight the storm, it simply maintains its position and continues to shine. It doesn't try to calm the waves, it rises above them. It doesn't attempt to control the weather, It provides a steady reference point that helps others navigate through the darkness. This is the secret of emotional mastery. You don't need to eliminate challenges from your life. You need to become someone who remains steady while navigating those challenges. You don't need to control external events. You need to develop the internal strength to respond to those events with wisdom and grace. Consider how this principle applies to your daily life. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you have a choice. You can allow their action to determine your emotional state, or you can maintain your inner equilibrium while handling the situation appropriately. The external event is the same in both cases. Someone changed lanes abruptly. The difference lies entirely in your response. This might seem like a small distinction, but it's actually the difference between living as a victim and living as a master. When you react automatically to traffic situations, you're essentially saying, I give you permission to control my emotional state. When you respond consciously, you're saying, I acknowledge what happened, and I choose my response. This choice, the choice to respond rather than react, is available to you in every moment of every day. But here's what most people don't understand. This choice becomes easier with practice. Just as a muscle grows stronger through consistent exercise, your ability to choose your response grows stronger through consistent use. Let me share a practical example of how this works. Sarah, a marketing executive, used to arrive at work already stressed from her commute. Traffic delays, aggressive drivers, and parking problems had become the primary determinants of her mood each morning. She would walk into her office carrying the emotional residue of her journey, and this would color her interactions with colleagues and clients throughout the day. After learning these principles, Sarah began to see her commute differently. Instead of viewing it as something that happened to her, she began to see it as her daily training ground for emotional mastery. Each traffic delay became an opportunity to practice patience. Each aggressive driver became a chance to practice non-reactivity. Each parking challenge became a moment to practice problem solving without stress. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For the first few weeks, Sarah caught herself reacting in the old way, but each time she caught herself, she would take 3 deep breaths and consciously choose a different response. Gradually, her commute became a time of peace rather than stress. More importantly, she began to arrive at work centered and calm, which improved every aspect of her professional life. This is how sovereignty is built, not through grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but through countless small choices to respond consciously rather than react automatically. Each conscious choice is like placing a stone in the foundation of your inner strength. Over time, these stones create a structure so solid that no external force can shake it. The beauty of this approach is that it works regardless of your circumstance. Whether you're dealing with a difficult boss, a challenging relationship, financial pressures, or health concerns, the principle remains the same. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control your response to what happens to you. This doesn't mean you should become passive or indifferent. Conscious response often requires more action than automatic reaction, not less. The difference is that conscious response comes from a place of choice rather than compulsion, from wisdom rather than emotion, from strength rather than weakness. When you respond consciously to a difficult situation, you're not suppressing your emotions, you're choosing what to do with them. You're not denying reality, you're choosing how to engage with that reality. You're not avoiding challenges, you're meeting them from a place of inner strength rather than inner chaos. This shift in approach has profound implications for every area of your life. In relationships, you stop being at the mercy of others' moods and start being a source of stability. In work, you stop being overwhelmed by pressure and start being someone who performs well under pressure. In finances, you stop being paralyzed by uncertainty and start being someone who makes clear decisions despite uncertainty. But perhaps most importantly, you stop being a victim of your own mind. You stop being pushed around by your own thoughts and emotions. You become the conscious director of your own experience, the sovereign ruler of your own inner kingdom. This sovereignty isn't achieved through force or willpower alone. It's achieved through understanding the nature of your own mind and learning to work with it rather than against it. It's achieved through recognizing that your thoughts are not you, your emotions are not you, and your circumstances are not you. You are the consciousness that observes thoughts, experiences, emotions, and navigates circumstance. This understanding creates a profound shift in how you relate to difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this here to teach me?" Instead of thinking, "I can't handle this," you begin to think, "This is an opportunity to develop my capacity." Instead of feeling, "This is overwhelming," you begin to feel, "This is challenging, and I can meet this challenge with grace." The key insight is that every moment of irritation, every instance of frustration, every experience of stress is actually an opportunity to strengthen your mental discipline. Just as lifting weights builds physical strength, consciously choosing your response to challenges builds emotional strength. When you begin to see challenges as training opportunities, rather than problems to be avoided, everything changes. You stop trying to create a life without difficulties, and start building the capacity to handle difficulties with wisdom and grace. You stop seeking external circumstances that will make you feel better and start developing internal resources that make you feel centered regardless of external circumstance. This is the foundation of true sovereignty, not the power to control the world around you, but the power to govern your response to the world around you. This power is always available to you, in every moment, regardless of what is happening in your life. The question is, will you claim it? Understanding the principles of inner sovereignty is just the beginning. To maintain lasting calm, you must also understand the natural laws that govern mental equilibrium. These laws are as reliable as the laws of physics, and once you understand them, you can work with them, rather than against them. The first law is the law of correspondence, which states that your external experience will always reflect your internal state. This doesn't mean you can control everything that happens to you through positive thinking. It means that your interpretation of what happens to you will always be filtered through your current level of consciousness. When you're operating from a place of inner calm, you naturally see solutions where others see problems. You notice opportunities where others see obstacles. You respond to challenges with creativity where others react with panic. This isn't because your circumstances are different, it's because your relationship to your circumstances is different. Consider two people facing the same situation, unexpected job loss. The person operating from inner turbulence sees catastrophe, focuses on lack, and makes decisions from fear. The person operating from inner calm sees transition, focuses on possibility, and makes decisions from wisdom. The external event is identical, but the internal response creates completely different outcomes. This law teaches us that changing your external circumstances without changing your internal state is like rearranging furniture on a sinking ship. You might feel better temporarily, but you haven't addressed the fundamental issue. True change always begins from within and radiates outward. The second law is the law of rhythm, which reveals that all of life moves in cycles. Just as the seasons change predictably, your life experiences follow natural rhythms of expansion and contraction, challenge and ease, loss and gain. Understanding these rhythms prevents you from being caught off guard by inevitable changes. When you're in a difficult period, knowing that this is part of a natural cycle helps you maintain perspective. You don't waste energy fighting the natural flow of life. You use the energy to navigate the current phase with wisdom, while preparing for the next phase. During a contraction phase, whether it's financial difficulty, relationship challenges, or health problems, you focus on building internal resources, learning essential lessons, and preparing for the next expansion. During an expansion phase, whether it's career success, relationship harmony, or improved health, you focus on expressing your gifts, serving others, and building reserves for the next contraction. This understanding transforms your relationship to both good times and difficult times. You don't become complacent during good times because you know they won't last forever. You don't become desperate during difficult times because you know they're temporary phases in a larger cycle. The third law is the law of polarity, which states that everything contains its opposite. Every problem contains the seed of its solution. Every challenge contains an opportunity for growth. Every loss contains the potential for gain. This law teaches you to look for the hidden gift in every apparent difficulty. When you lose a job, you might discover your true calling. When a relationship ends, you might find your independence. When you face a health challenge, you might discover your inner strength. The key is to approach every situation with the understanding that there are always multiple ways to interpret any experience. This doesn't mean you should pretend that difficulties aren't difficult or that losses aren't real. It means you should train yourself to see the complete picture rather than just the obvious surface. Every master of life has learned to find the opportunity hidden within the obstacle. The fourth law is the law of cause and effect, which reveals that every external result has an internal cause. Your current circumstances are the result of past choices, past thoughts, past action. More importantly, your future circumstances will be determined by your present choices, present thoughts, present actions. This law is both sobering and liberating. It's sobering because it means you must take complete responsibility for your life. It's liberating because it means you have the power to change your life by changing your choices. You're not a victim of random events. You're the author of your own experience. When you truly understand this law, you stop wasting energy blaming others for your circumstances and start investing energy in creating the circumstances you want. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I learn from this and how can I respond in a way that creates the future I want?" These laws work together to create a framework for understanding how consciousness operates. When you align your thoughts and actions with these natural principles, you experience a sense of flow and ease that comes from working with the fundamental forces of life rather than against them. Let me share how these laws work together in the life of Marcus, a small business owner who faced bankruptcy during an economic downturn. Initially, Marcus responded with panic and blame. He focused on what was happening to him rather than what he could do about it. He fought against the natural rhythm of business cycles and tried to force outcomes through sheer effort. The turning point came when Marcus began to understand these natural laws. He realized that his external crisis was reflecting his internal state of fear and confusion. He began to work on developing inner calm and clarity, knowing that this would eventually reflect in his external circumstances. He understood that his business was in a contraction phase, which is a natural part of economic cycle. Instead of fighting this rhythm, he used it as an opportunity to streamline his operations, focus on his core strength, and prepare for the next expansion phase. He looked for the hidden opportunities within his apparent problem. The financial pressure forced him to become more creative and efficient. The loss of employees helped him discover which aspects of his business were truly essential. The reduction in income motivated him to find new revenue streams he might never have explored otherwise. Most importantly, he took complete responsibility for his results. Instead of blaming the economy, his customers, or his competitors, he focused on what he could control: his thoughts, his actions, and his responses. He began making decisions from wisdom rather than fear, from possibility rather than limitation. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was profound. Within 18 months, Marcus had not only saved his business, but had created a stronger, more resilient company than he'd ever had before. The crisis that nearly destroyed him had actually been the catalyst for his greatest growth. This is how natural laws work. They're always operating, whether you understand them or not. When you work with them, they support your growth and success. When you work against them, they create resistance and difficulty. The choice is always yours. Understanding these laws also helps you develop realistic expectations about the path to mastery. You don't expect to achieve perfect calm immediately. You understand that mastery develops through cycles of practice and progress. You don't expect to eliminate all challenges from your life. You understand that challenges are the natural means by which consciousness grows. You begin to see that every upset, every irritation, every moment of stress is actually life providing you with an opportunity to apply these laws and strengthen your mastery. Instead of avoiding difficulties, you begin to welcome them as training opportunities. Instead of resisting change, you begin to flow with it as a natural part of growth. This shift in perspective is revolutionary. You stop being a victim of life's natural rhythms and start being a conscious participant in your own evolution. You stop fighting the fundamental forces of existence and start using them to create the life you want. The laws of mental equilibrium are not theoretical concepts, they're practical tools for navigating the complexities of human experience. When you understand them deeply and apply them consistently, you develop the ability to remain calm and centered regardless of what life presents to you. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to life's challenges, it means you become skilled at working with them. You become like a master sailor who doesn't try to control the wind, but has learned to use whatever wind is available to reach the desired destination. Even with a solid understanding of these natural laws, most people find their journey toward lasting calm sabotaged by internal enemies, destructive patterns of thought and behavior that seem to arise automatically whenever they try to maintain their equilibrium. These enemies are subtle but powerful, and they must be identified and neutralized if you want to achieve true mastery over your mind. The first enemy is attachment, the belief that your happiness depends on things being a certain way. Attachment turns preferences into requirements, desires into demands, and hopes into expectations. When you're attached to specific outcomes, you become emotionally hostage to circumstances beyond your control. Attachment manifests in countless ways. You become attached to people behaving in ways that please you. You become attached to your plans unfolding without obstacles. You become attached to your image of how life should be, rather than accepting how life actually is. This attachment creates a constant state of tension, because reality rarely conforms to our expectations. The antidote to attachment is not indifference, it's what ancient wisdom traditions call detached engagement. You care deeply about outcomes while holding lightly to your need for specific results. You work diligently toward your goals while remaining emotionally flexible about how those goals might be achieved. Maria, a project manager, discovered this principle during a particularly challenging product launch. She had become so attached to her original timeline and specifications that every delay and modification felt like a personal attack. Her stress levels were so high that she was making poor decisions and alienating her team members. The breakthrough came when Maria learned to separate her professional commitment from her emotional attachment. She remained fully committed to creating the best possible product, while releasing her rigid attachment to exactly how and when that would happen. This shift allowed her to adapt creatively to changing circumstances while maintaining her inner peace. The second enemy is resistance, the refusal to accept what is actually happening in favor of what you wish were happening. Resistance creates suffering by putting you in conflict with reality itself. When you resist what is, you waste enormous amounts of energy fighting battles that cannot be won. Resistance appears whenever you find yourself thinking, "This shouldn't be happening," or "This isn't fair," or "I can't handle this." These thoughts put you in opposition to circumstances that already exist, creating internal conflict that solves nothing and changes nothing. The alternative to resistance is acceptance, not passive resignation, but active acknowledgement of what is actually happening. Acceptance doesn't mean you like what's happening, or that you won't work to change it. It means you stop wasting energy fighting reality and start investing energy in responding to reality effectively. James, a sales executive, faced this challenge when his company was acquired by a larger corporation. Initially, he resisted the changes, complaining about new policies, criticizing new management, and longing for the way things used to be. This resistance made him miserable and ineffective in his new environment. The transformation began when James accepted that the acquisition was a completed fact that couldn't be changed. He stopped fighting the new reality and started learning how to succeed within it. He channeled his energy into understanding the new systems, building relationships with new colleagues, and finding opportunities within the new structure. His career flourished once he stopped resisting change and started embracing. The third enemy is judgment, the habit of constantly evaluating experiences as good or bad, right or wrong, favorable or unfavorable. Judgment creates emotional volatility by tying your inner state to your opinions about external events. When you judge something as bad, you create suffering. When you judge something as good, you create attachment and the fear of loss. Judgment also creates separation from others, from experiences, and from parts of yourself. When you judge others harshly, you create conflict in relationships. When you judge your experiences negatively, you create resistance to life itself. When you judge parts of yourself as unacceptable, you create internal division and self-rejection. The alternative to judgment is discernment, the ability to observe and evaluate without emotional charge. Discernment allows you to recognize what is helpful and what is harmful, what serves your growth and what doesn't, without creating emotional turbulence in the process. Lisa, a team leader, struggled with judgment toward a colleague who had very different working styles. She constantly judged his approach as wrong, his methods as ineffective, and his personality as difficult. This judgment created tension in their working relationship and stress in her daily experience. The shift came when Lisa learned to replace judgment with discernment. Instead of judging her colleague as wrong, she began to observe objectively what worked and what didn't work in their collaboration. She focused on finding ways to leverage their different strengths rather than criticizing their different approaches. This change in perspective improved their working relationship and reduced her stress significantly. The fourth enemy is identification, the mistake of believing that you are your thoughts, your emotions, your circumstances, or your role. When you identify with temporary states and conditions, you create suffering by tying your sense of self to things that are constantly changing. Identification appears when you think, I am angry, instead of I am experiencing anger. It appears when you think, I am a failure, instead of I am learning from a setback. It appears when you think, I am overwhelmed, instead of I am feeling overwhelmed right now. The alternative to identification is observation, the recognition that you are the consciousness that experiences thoughts, emotions, and circumstances, rather than being those experiences themselves. This creates what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own mental processes without being consumed by them. David, an entrepreneur, discovered this principle during a particularly difficult period when his startup was struggling. He had become so identified with his business that its problems became his identity. Every setback felt like a personal failure. Every criticism felt like a personal attack, and every financial loss felt like a loss of his self-worth. The breakthrough came when David learned to separate his identity from his business results. He began to see himself as someone who was having the experience of running a challenging business, rather than someone who was defined by that business. This shift allowed him to make better decisions because he was no longer paralyzed by the fear of failure or intoxicated by the prospect of success. These four enemies, attachment, resistance, judgment, and identification, work together to create most of the suffering in human experience. They're not character flaws or moral failings. They're natural tendencies of the human mind that must be consciously managed if you want to achieve lasting peace. The key to neutralizing these enemies is awareness. You can't change what you don't notice. The first step is to become aware of these patterns as they arise in your daily experience. Notice when you're attached to specific outcomes. Notice when you're resisting what's actually happening. Notice when you're judging experiences or people. Notice when you're identifying with temporary states. Once you develop this awareness, you can begin to choose different responses. Instead of automatically falling into these patterns, you can recognize what's happening and choose a more conscious response. This doesn't happen overnight. It requires patient practice and consistent attention, but the rewards are profound. As you learn to neutralize these internal enemies, you discover that most of your suffering was self-created. You realize that the external world is far less problematic than your internal reactions to the external world. You develop the ability to remain calm and centered regardless of what life presents to you. This is the path to genuine freedom, not the freedom from challenges, but the freedom to respond to challenges with wisdom, grace, and inner peace. It's available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of what you're facing in your life. The question is, are you willing to do the work required to claim this freedom? Lasting transformation requires specific daily practices that systematically build your capacity for calm and strengthen your resistance to emotional turbulence. These practices are not complicated, but they must be done consistently if you want to experience lasting results. The first practice is morning mental preparation, the discipline of setting your internal state before engaging with the external world. Most people wake up and immediately begin reacting to whatever demands their attention. They check their phones, review their schedules, and start their day from a reactive rather than a responsive state. This approach guarantees that you'll spend your day being pushed around by circumstances rather than navigating them consciously. It's like going into battle without armor, or setting sail without checking your compass. You're leaving your most important asset, your mental state, to chance. The alternative is to begin each day with intentional preparation. This doesn't require hours of meditation or elaborate ritual. It requires 15 minutes of conscious attention to your internal state before you engage with external demands. Start by taking 5 minutes to breathe deeply and center yourself. Feel your connection to the present moment. Remind yourself of your intention to remain calm and responsive throughout the day. Visualize yourself handling whatever challenges might arise with grace and wisdom. Then spend 5 minutes reviewing your schedule and priorities for the day. Instead of just thinking about what you need to do, think about who you want to be while doing it. How do you want to show up in meetings? How do you want to respond to interruptions? How do you want to handle unexpected challenges? Finally, spend 5 minutes connecting with your deeper purpose. Why does your work matter? How can you serve others through your activities today? What positive impact do you want to have on the people you encounter? This 15-minute investment creates a foundation of conscious intention that will support you throughout the day. You're not just preparing for what you'll do, you're preparing for who you'll be while doing it. The second practice is conscious breathing during stressful moments. Most people hold their breath or breathe shallowly when they're under pressure, which actually increases their stress and reduces their ability to think clearly. Conscious breathing is your most immediate tool for restoring calm in any situation. The technique is simple but powerful. When you notice stress arising, immediately take 3 deep breaths. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and exhale slowly through your mouth for 6 counts. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system and creates immediate physiological calm. But conscious breathing is more than just a relaxation technique. It's a way of interrupting automatic reactive patterns and creating space for conscious choice. When you begin to breathe consciously, you create a moment of awareness between stimulus and response. In that moment, you can choose how to respond rather than simply reacting automatically. Jennifer, a customer service manager, discovered the power of this practice during a particularly challenging call with an angry customer. Instead of immediately responding defensively, she took 3 conscious breaths. This brief allowed her to hear the customer's underlying concerns rather than just their angry words. She was able to respond with empathy and solve the problem effectively, transforming a potentially negative interaction into a positive one. The third practice is evening reflection, the discipline of reviewing your day's responses and planning for improvement. This is how you turn daily experiences into daily growth. Without reflection, you're likely to repeat the same patterns indefinitely. Spend 10 minutes each evening reviewing your day. Ask yourself, where did I respond consciously today? Where did I react automatically? What triggered my stress responses? How could I have handled difficult situations more effectively? What did I learn about myself today? This isn't about self-criticism or perfectionism. It's about honest self-assessment in service of growth. You're not trying to judge your performance. You're trying to understand your patterns so you can improve them. Then spend 5 minutes planning for tomorrow. Based on what you learned today, how do you want to approach similar situations tomorrow? What specific practices will you use to maintain your calm? How will you remind yourself to breathe consciously when stress arises? The fourth practice is gratitude cultivation, the discipline of focusing on what's working in your life rather than what's missing or wrong. Gratitude is not just a feel-good exercise, it's a powerful tool for rewiring your brain to notice positive patterns rather than dwelling on negative ones. Spend 5 minutes each day writing down 3 things you're grateful for. But don't just list them, really feel the appreciation. Think about why these things matter to you. Consider how they enrich your life. Allow yourself to experience the emotion of gratitude, not just the thought of. This practice gradually shifts your default mental patterns from scarcity to abundance, from problem-focused to solution-focused, from what's wrong to what's right. Over time, this creates a more positive and resilient mindset that naturally supports inner calm. The fifth practice is physical movement for mental clarity. Your mind and body are intimately connected, and physical tension creates mental tension. Regular movement helps discharge stress from your system and creates the physical foundation for mental calm. You don't need intense workouts or complicated exercise routines. 20 minutes of walking, 10 minutes of stretching, or 5 minutes of deep breathing exercises can significantly impact your mental state. The key is consistency, not intensity. Physical movement also creates mental space. When you're walking or stretching, you're not able to engage in the mental loops that create stress. You're forced to be present in your body, which naturally calms your mind. The sixth practice is conscious communication, the discipline of speaking and listening from a place of calm rather than reactivity. Most interpersonal stress comes from unconscious communication patterns that create misunderstanding and conflict. Before speaking, especially in charged situations, and ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? Is it kind? This simple filter prevents most of the verbal reactions that create problems in relationships. When listening, focus on understanding rather than preparing your response. Most people listen just long enough to formulate their reply, which creates miscommunication and missed opportunities for connection. True listening requires being present and curious about the other person's perspective. Thomas, a department head, transformed his team's dynamics by implementing this practice. Instead of immediately responding to complaints or suggestions, he would ask clarifying questions. This simple change created an environment where people felt heard and understood, which reduced conflict and increased collaboration. These practices work together to create a comprehensive system for maintaining inner calm. They're not separate activities but interconnected disciplines that support and strengthen each other. The morning preparation creates the foundation, conscious breathing maintains it throughout the day, evening reflection deepens it, gratitude cultivation sustains it, physical movement supports it, and conscious communication expresses it. The key to success with these practices is consistency, not perfection. You don't need to do them perfectly, you need to do them regularly. Start with 1 or 2 practices and gradually add others as they become habitual. The goal is not to create another source of stress in your life, but to develop sustainable practices that naturally support your inner calm. Remember, these practices are not ends in themselves, they're means to an end. The end is becoming someone who naturally remains calm and centered regardless of external circumstances. The person you become through these practices will find that life no longer happens to them. They happen to life. You have everything you need to begin this transformation right now. You don't need perfect circumstances, unlimited time, or special conditions. You just need the commitment to begin and the discipline to continue. The question is not whether these practices will work. The question is whether you will work with them consistently enough to experience their transformative power. The journey toward unshakable calm begins with a single conscious breath, a single moment of awareness, a single choice to respond rather than react. That moment is available to you right now. The question is, will you take it?